In today's video, I'm sharing 26 ways you can get creative thrifting and upcycling items. These I found mostly from Goodwill, and they are all under $5. I thought I found me a crown at Goodwill, people. I was about to get this and put this on my head. It was super pretty. And then I realized, nope, it's a candle holder and it's only $2.99. So I was like, I have a ton of these Dollar Tree pillar candles that will look perfect in here, and it's gorgeous all on its own. However, we can't just leave it like that. And that candle holder is absolutely too phenomenal to do anything with. So we're going to need to grab us a napkin so we can decoupage this joint onto the candle and give it a little upcycling love. Well, it's a Dollar Tree candle. We're not really upcycling that, but the candle will add the upcycle to the upcycle and give a little oomph, if that makes any sense. You guys, you're following me, right? Anyhow, to decoupage a candle, you're just going to need to trim out whatever sections you would like of the napkin to put onto the candle. I'm using a little bit of water on the edge of a paintbrush and just getting those detailed sections. If you're looking for something specific, it helps to wrap the napkin around the candle, and it takes time and patience. I know it can be a little rough, but I promise it's worth it. I just wanted one real pretty design on here, so I took my time making sure that the design didn't overlap on the napkin. And then I removed all those extra sneaky layers because we're only going to use the top decorative layer, and grabbed me a piece of parchment paper. I'm using a heat gun for this. This is the technique I like to use. You can use iron if you would like. This is just what works best for me and what I prefer. There is no right or wrong way. You do this how you would like, and keep in mind it gets hot, okay? So watch your fingers. But what you're looking for here is that napkin turns translucent. If you still have that white color of the napkin, it hasn't melted into that candle just yet, so you'll want to put the parchment paper back over, continue to heat up that napkin, heat up that wax, and allow everything to melt together. When you're happy with that, you just put it right on back into your little candle holder and display. Sometimes it is the simplest of things that catch my eye at Goodwill. This little piece was only $2.99, and I knew we could keep it vintagely intact for me to give you some really nice ideas to use pieces like this in your home, starting with a simple Dollar Tree decoupaged pillar candle and a vintage candle holder. This idea is super easy. All you're going to do is place them right in the center and then add some greenery. I'm just taking a couple little sprigs of some lamb's ear here, and that is it. For this idea, we're going to grab some messy moss. Now, this is what I had right next to my crafting station. Obviously, take this idea, remix it, use whatever moss you would like, or don't use moss. It can get gross. And sometimes it stinks. Don't even get me started. Then I'm just taking this beautiful napkin decoupage candle and plopping it right in the center. A simple, easy way to add a little something something into your home. One of my favorite ways to use beautiful vintage pieces like this is around the sinks. They make beautiful little pieces to add your hand soaps and some little sprays, a little sprig of greenery, just brighten up the area and add some really nice touches. Next time you're in Goodwill, head on over to their houseware section. They always have a ton of unique decor over there, usually for under $5. This piece was only $3.99, and it also had a hanger installed on the back. We're gonna give this piece a nice, super easy updated look by taking some of this paint and applying a nice coat. I absolutely hated the color of this piece. Now, if you would like, absolutely stop here. The piece is stunning and already it looks updated. But we're not going to do that. We're going to keep on going and add a little bit of silver gilding wax all around our piece. I found this beautiful hand-painted bunt pan at Goodwill for $2.99. I mean, at least to me, it's a bunt pan. You guys, let me know in the comments below what you call this. I wanted to keep this intact, and I didn't really feel like it had a sealer over it. Was scared that I would mess up these beautiful hand-painted little gems of flowers if I did a real good soap and wash. So I just took my little spritzer and gave it a couple little spritzes with a napkin and wiped everything out. It actually wasn't really that dirty. And then I grabbed some of my Dixie-Belle Gold gilding wax and gave all the little gold areas except for the centerpiece a little touch up to just help those sections kind of pop where they've faded over time. There are a bunch of ways that you could incorporate a beautiful vintage piece like this into your home without doing too much to it and not gluing a bunch of stuff to ruin the piece. So I'm just taking some moss and a couple little pieces of greenery, some berry bits. I didn't glue anything down, I just kind of stuck them in the center there and used it to hold some K-cups. Goodwill had this unique little tea light candle string piece, and I'm like, this just needs a little updating and I think will be good. And if you like the design, I'm sorry, but it's gotta go. Starting with the string. I mean, really, I thought it was glued in there, but it wasn't. I just snipped the end off and out it came. Now we had these holes to deal with, so I grabbed this stuff, which I love this stuff. It's buttery soft. It's really inexpensive. You can pick it up from Walmart for like $4 and it works so good. So I just shoved some of it in these holes. I let it dry like 30 minutes and then came in with a baby wipe and just wiped everything down. These might have been the cleanest pieces I ever thrifted. I don't even think any dirt came out. Oh, and did I forget to tell you how much this was? $2.99, people. And do you see where the tag actually came from? Hobby Lobby for $12.99. Since I want to decoupage these, I'm going to give them a nice base coat. Use whatever white paint you would like. The paint just helps the design to pop. And I really like the way that chalk paint gives a good coverage and I don't have to go back over it with so many layers. It just kind of saves me some time. How about this beautiful napkin? And what I love about napkins like this is when you open it up, it's kind of a whole piece. It's not like 4 different sections. I like the ones that are 4 different sections too, but I just feel like I get a little bit more play out of these. I cut down 3 little sections to size to fit over the cubes, and then I pulled the sneaky little layers off the back. It's important to make sure you're just using the top decorative layer. Those extra sneaky layers on the bottom, if you leave them on, it can be troublesome trying to get the Mod Podge to actually stick to that top decorative layer. And there's several different ways you can do this. One is just tearing a corner like I am here, and it usually reveals the extra layers. I'm just using some Mod Podge. You can absolutely use whatever medium you would like. And whenever I decoupage napkins, a go-to for me is a fan brush. I just like how thin they are at the tip. So if I gotta shove them in any little sections, they get in there without having a whole lot of excess anywhere. And I also like to say less is more. You don't need a ton of medium, just put a little bit on and do section by section if you're not doing the iron-on method. I also like to use a sponge. This is a dry sponge. You can pick these up at Walmart in a pack of like 6, and then press straight down. It helps to absorb any excess Mod Podge and also flatten your piece out without having too many wrinkles. And right here I did a little close up so you could see how the Mod Podge does seep up through the napkin. So the sponge really does help grab any excess and help reduce wrinkles. You can absolutely decoupage all the sides of your pieces if you find stuff like this. For the video and for time's sake, I just did the front, and honestly, I kind of like having the white on the sides kind of pop out. I feel like the design on the napkin stands out even more. Once I have my piece on there, sometimes I like to grab a little bit of cling wrap and kind of just go over it just to smooth out any extra little lumpy bumpies that could possibly be in here. When these were all dry, I just sanded off the excess, and people check these out. How amazing do these look? Sometimes a napkin, don't ever count the napkins out. They can really elevate pieces with a little bit of decoupage. We see a little closed piece at Goodwill, we pick it up. And people, this piece had a friend, but they wouldn't let me buy it. Well, I'm sad. They wouldn't let me get the one that didn't have the tag. They said that I couldn't have it because it was all scribbled. I'm like, it has a friend. So I only got one. But don't worry, you know your girl's gonna make the best of this. First off, we're gonna have to get this tape off. And I tell you what, like, getting tape off glass when it leaves that residue on there, I just cannot stand it. I'll use like alcohol, you know, because that really gets it off, and then I'll give it a nice scrub down. But keep in mind, if you struggle with that, I do too. And this sucker didn't want to come off there either. So even the heat gun I was having a moment. There's a multitude of ideas that you could use for something like this, but I decided to take some of Dollar Tree's messy moss and some teeny tiny floral bits and make a floral terrarium out of it. You could absolutely glue your pieces down if you would like, but I didn't want to do any of that in the event that I wanted to switch this out. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be reselling this at some point or not, so I didn't want to ruin this adorable little piece. Now I want to add a little something to this, so I'm taking my TDS Creative Decoupage tissue paper, and this is called Place Cards, and just cutting off one of the little designs down in the corner. I'm going to grab a thick piece of cardstock paper and trim down to size, adding a little bit of Mod Podge on the back. You could use glue if you want to use Elmer's glue or tacky glue, whatever, to attach this onto there. It's completely up to you. Mod Podge works really well as a glue, so I just popped some on here, added on the little Place Cards decoupage tissue paper for an added little accent, and then cut out the section so it looks like a tag. If you have a hole puncher, use a hole puncher. People, I just sometimes wing things, and this was sitting near me, so I just used my Cricut tool and popped a hole in that joint. I mean, it got the job done, right? So I mean, what are we complaining about? Next, I grabbed some twine and I pulled it through and then attached it to the top of our little piece that we created here. And I think this is so simple, and it just took a couple minutes to make, and it adds to any little space around your home. Seen this piece at Goodwill, I initially thought that it was some kind of tray, but to my surprise, it was really part of a children's toy. Since it was solid wood and only $2.99, I knew that even if I didn't use it for this video, that I was going to use it for something because it was a really nice piece of wood. It started with just giving it a nice clean down was not worried about sanding the piece down at all. The plan was to keep the paint job rustic for this beautiful Decoupaged TDS tissue paper. I'm gonna take some chalk paint and give this a messy coat all over the piece. I don't care if there's spots missing. I don't care if there's paint dripping. I was not going for perfect. And I didn't care that there was like pen marks or any of that on the bottom. I wanted to keep this rustic. I did use a couple little spritzes of water to help me move the paint around. I love to use that tip to try and save some paint. It works amazing with chalk paint. When I got to this coverage, I took some of my antique Waverly wax on a little piece of cloth with some more water and then went over doing a nice wash with this stuff. Again, keeping it very rustic. I left the center of the piece completely white. I did not put any of the antique wax there, so as we apply our decoupage tissue paper, the design pops and then we can come back and blend things in afterwards. I took a little bit of water on the end of a paintbrush and then proceeded to trim out our beautiful design. I took a minute centering the piece, and then when I was done, I grabbed one of my TDS artist brushes. These are perfect for decoupage. I'm going to use them to spread out our Mod Podge and make sure that our decoupage tissue paper design is completely attached. I'm using just my hands here to press this down. This paper is super easy to work with. You could absolutely use cling wrap, or use a sponge as well, your brayer, whatever you would like. This usually goes on really well, even just adding a little bit of water and using your hand. But depending on your skill set, if you're a beginner, cling wrap goes a long way. I know most people love utilizing that to help get those wrinkles out. You could even use the iron-on method for a piece like this. It's really a preference. My friends have been decoupaging so long. If I'm being honest, I kind of like having my hands and my paintbrushes all in it. Love the iron-on method and the end result that it usually gives, but there's just something about brushing that Mod Podge on and applying the decoupage tissue paper with your hands that I absolutely love. Often I'm asked why I love fan brushes so much for decoupage, and this is the reason right here. Around the edges, you're able to take those thin layers of that fan brush and easily test out to see if everything is connected. It will gingerly lift up just the tiniest sections that haven't been attached and allow you to smush just enough of your medium underneath of there and then paint it right down seamlessly. Sometimes using a thicker brush can actually cause it to smush together, mess up the design, or even tear your paper, and I don't have that issue with these. When everything was dry, I took a little bit of that white background paint and tappity tapped all around the edges of our decoupage paper, blending everything in together with my finger. When I was all done, I took my little stamp and made it official that it was actually handcrafted by me and sealed over this whole piece. I absolutely love how this turned out. For this Goodwill challenge, I'm going to be sharing how to do a stencil overlay on this adorable solid wood piece I found for just $3.99. Now the yellow tags were 50% off, so you know what that means. I only spent $2 on this joint. It wasn't really dirty, so I took my little water spritzer and gave it a little spritzy spritz and then wiped it down. There really wasn't even that much dust on this piece, to my surprise. For the main color, I'm going to be using this DIY paint in the mermaid tail color. Now, if you're not familiar with DIY paint, I absolutely love it. And if you're looking to check it out, my friend Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs is a retailer, and Her link is usually down in my description box. I'm gonna pop 2 coats on this little thing and allow it to dry. Use whatever color you would like for your base. I just really love this right now. I've actually been loving it for about a year. I love the little like tealish aqua, you know what I mean. Now, once it's dry, we're gonna need to pick another color. I'm gonna go with this one, okay? I'm gonna go with this one. And then we're gonna need a paintbrush. Use whatever you would like. I'm just going to be using my little artist brushes. They're perfect for decoupage, but you can use them for paint as well. I like to use them for dry brushing, which is what we're going to do to put a nice solid coverage all over this whole piece. And I'm trying not to stop in certain sections so we don't have any abrupt blobs in the piece. Just going from one end to the next and putting a decent coat over it so that white is all over our piece with just a minimal amount of that mermaid tail showing through. Now it's time to choose your stencil. Spring is coming, at least I'm telling myself that as it's -8 up here in Pennsylvania. Okay, spring is coming. So I grab one of these and it obviously doesn't fit. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna trim this joint down so this way it fits on here perfectly. And these I just pick up off Amazon, okay? They're easy to trim down, okay? You can keep the extra little bits in a little storage container. I love to make sure I hold on to all my little bits. You never know when you might need a stencil piece. These are real easy to fit in just a spot. I also think it's really cool to create your own unique idea off of a stencil and then grab the same color that we used as our base, okay? This is going to create an overlay. Once it dries, it's going to look so cool. But in order to do the other side, so it matches, we have to wash the stencil so we can completely flip it. Once you have this washed, you're going to want to make sure you dry it completely on both sides. Place it down in the same exact spot on the opposite side. If you're going to do a double piece like this, you can take this idea and remix it and use it just on one solid piece. All it takes is 2 different colors of paint. Obviously, you could use more if you would like. Instead of using just the white, you could use multiple colors. And then your solid background color, you just pop that right over. It's going to give you an awesome overlay appearance. I love this technique and you don't see it very often, but it's just another cool way to use stencils. Absolutely love stencils and giving you guys ideas for these. What an amazing way to give a little something something for spring, because spring is coming, my friends. Spring is coming. Next time you're in Goodwill, stop on over to their houseware section. They have some awesome wood pieces that you can get really inexpensively, like this You're My McDreamy sign. Anybody else a Grey's Anatomy fan? No? Okay. Well, then you wouldn't get why I grabbed this sign. Okay. It's a little crusty musty. Okay. It's very rustic as well, which I love. And it was only $1.99. So we're going to upcycle this. It does have holes on the back in case we wanted to hang it on the wall. I'm not going to do that though when you use this for a front door sign. But first we had to get rid of all the little stickies on the back. Then I grab my little finger sander and give this a nice sand down. Now with pieces like this, especially since it's wood, we could have sanded down and stripped the whole piece if we wanted to the bare wood. But I decided that I wanted to just share with you all that if you are not harboring every DIY tool in the shed out back, you can still upcycle pieces like this with bare minimum supplies and little adjustments with some prepping to still get really high-end finishes, whether you're keeping them at home or reselling them. When I was all done, I grabbed a baby wipe and gave this a nice wipe down. It wasn't overly dirty, but depending on how dirty your piece is, you might need to grab something like Krug Cutter or some dish soap and give it a nice scrub. I want to bring back some of that vibrance of the wood, so I'm just using Waverly's Antique Wax on a Baby Wipe to do that. If your piece does not have a sealer over it, it is a simple way to give old wood an updated, vibrant look. Plus, some of those older woods got that yellow hue, and this helps knock that off and give it a beautiful brown tone. When the antique wax was dry, I grabbed some painter's tape and just trimmed off the center of our piece here. I wanted to make sure that we didn't get any white paint on the part that we just worked so hard to update. The white paint is going to serve two functions for this part. One, it's going to cover up those words no longer want to see. And two, it's going to give us a nice base for our decoupage to have that design really pop through. I highly recommend using a chalk paint or a clay-based chalk paint for this, even a multi-surface over an acrylic paint. It's going to save you so many extra coats. For the decoupage portion, we're going to be putting a little welcome-ish sign on here. For anyone interested, this is TDS Decoupage Paper. It is part of my own personal creative brand and can be found at the DIYstruggle.com. I have over 40 designs for you to choose from. This is tissue paper and it's super easy to work with. I'm trimming this little design down to size, and for our medium, I'm just going to use some Mod Podge, but people use whatever decoupage paper, napkins, medium you would like to upcycle your pieces. This is just what works best for me and some of my favorite things. And obviously I love using my own products and sharing them and how amazing they are with you. Since I want to do the iron-on method, I put a nice thick juicy layer of Mod Podge all over this and allowed it to dry. And then I took the little sections that I had to trim out and just kind of tore around the edges, because I feel like when I go back over these pieces, it's better to have it like this to blend in with some paint. When your Mod Podge is all dry, it is now time to bring on in the iron. Now people, you do not have to use this iron. I keep this little sucker right next to me while I'm crafting, and I will turn this all the way up. Feel free to use what iron works best for you. And you're also going to need some parchment paper. You're going to want to line that up over your piece once you have everything in place, and then iron from one side to the next. The parchment paper is going to help protect your piece and your iron from sticking together and creating any issues as you're ironing on your decoupage paper or your napkin. When your piece is all ironed on, if you want to go around with your sandpaper, you can go ahead and trim off any excess. If you have any touch-ups, you go right ahead and do that as well. A little tip: if you have sections where you had torn off, you can take some of the paint that was in the background, take your thumb after you tap some of that paint on there and just pull it away, and it will help that paint blend right into your paper. If you want to seal over this, I would recommend letting it dry for at least 24 hours and then putting a nice thin layer over top of your piece. Next time you're in Goodwill around the holiday season, head on over to their Christmas wear section. They have a bunch of items for under $5, and depending on the day you go, you can get beautiful pieces like this one that's originally $9.99 for 50% off. I was so excited to find this piece in the store. I didn't have them check to see if the lights worked. So the first thing I had to do was plug this joint in and see if they came on. And I was so excited because they did. Then I almost passed out because I was like, what is that? I don't want to deal with it, whatever it was. I noticed there was tape, and then I realized that there was a battery pack. I'm like, where does this rabbit hole lead to? So I just continued taking things off, and then I got a little scared. Anybody else get scared that some bug or something's gonna come flying out? See me like, gingerly tapping that joint, seeing what falls out. I was also nervous that the battery was going to be like corroded or something, you know, acid all around it. I didn't want to get that stuff everywhere. So I removed those batteries and went and got 2 new ones because it was actually pretty clean. And to my surprise, once I popped these suckers in here, it actually had a whole nother set of lights that weren't the plug-in to the wall ones. And they worked. But before I could go shoving this battery pack back up here, I noticed there was a bunch of glue stuck under here. So I just decided to pry it out using a little Cricut tool. Nice thick little layer of hot glue. You could absolutely remove this completely, glue that sucker back up. This is just how I decided to go about it. I had these little adhesive pieces that I pick up from Home Depot. Just cut them down to size and then put them right on in here and push the battery pack back up. Since there were electrical bits on this, I didn't want to take it to the sink and start dousing it with the mother of natural cleaning supplies that I own. So instead, I used some hot water and 7th generation baby wipes and gave this sucker a nice rub down, and I came back in with some towels and dried it off. I wasn't going for the shabby chic vibe, so I removed all those flowers. Absolutely use whatever kind of paint you would like. I'm gonna use DIY's letterpress gray paint for the base of this piece. I wanted it to resemble stone, and when this paint dries, it gives a gorgeous faux stone look. It took me 3 coats to get desired coverage. I wanted to frock the tree, so I grabbed some of my folk art multi-surface paints and put a layer all over the ends of this tree. This is going to be mine and my daughter's main tree this year. I just wanted something small for the space that we had, and I wanted to do something different than what I usually put up every year. Absolutely love the end result. We are going to decorate it together off camera, but for the staging, I decided to go really rustic with this piece, and I love how it turned out. I absolutely fell in love with this large wood piece I found at Goodwill. The details on it, from the handle to the design that was in the wood all around the entire piece, and let's not forget how amazing the condition of the piece was. It was just screaming for me to decoupage it. And before anyone goes light me up in the comments about that I check online, yes I did. It is retailed at $29.99 on eBay currently. That's not going to stop me from decoupaging it. I paid a whole $1.99, and I'm like, I could probably resell my art on here for the same. One of the struggles with upcycling is you never know what you're dealing with, and I wasn't sure how this was on here. I thought it was like a sticky backing, so I grabbed my heat gun, I heated it up, and then I grabbed a little plastic card and trying to peel it up, and that wasn't working. Since this isn't my first rodeo with this, I knew to grab some soapy water and a little scraper. So I took some soapy water and just started spraying, and I let it sit for like 10 minutes, and then I would just scrape and peel it up. And for those of you that are like, Brandy, why didn't you just sand the whole piece? Listen, I wanted to preserve the wood around the edges. I only to get the design up. You could absolutely sand the whole thing completely off, but I risked damaging the beautiful wood on the edges, and I didn't want to do that. Now, it did take me a couple hours of spraying it, soaking it, and then scraping it. I wasn't doing it consistently, you know what I mean? I'd spray it, come back, and then, you know how you got other crafts going on. That's what I was doing. When it got down to this point, I gave it a nice sand and then came in and wiped off all the excess before we got started, now that we're down to the bare minimum of what I was hoping to have to start our decoupage. Around the edges, I'm just taking a little bit of Antique Waverly wax and freshening up the wood. If your piece isn't sealed over, this allows you to kind of give wood a new life. It gets rid of any orange or yellowish hues to the wood and just helps bring some of that dark brown depth back to the stain, especially if you don't want to completely sand down your piece and start all over again. When that was all dry, I grabbed some painter's tape and then just kind of squared off the section that we kind of tore up to death. I used some white chalk paint so we had a nice base for our decoupage paper. And people, I do want to share with y'all that there was a little bit of tannus going on, which is some bleed through. You'll notice sometimes you might paint something and then some yellowing pops through. Now you can get a stain blocker and then paint that on there and then paint back over with your paint, and you won't see that yellow no more. But for this project, I knew it wasn't going to show up. So I just carried on with my Mod Podge, and I put a nice thick layer on here and allowed it to dry. And once it was all dry, people, you know what time it is. Say it with me. It's time to bring on in the iron. Now, if you're not familiar with me, any iron for this method will do. I keep this little joint right next to my craft table, so that's why I use it. I turn it all the way up, and that's how I do this method. For the decoupage paper, we're going to be using my own personal brand, TDS Decoupage Paper. This print is so pretty. I absolutely love the designs in this. Obviously, this tissue paper is pretty large, and I'm not going to be able to use the entire design. So picking a section was pretty rough, but I managed. Then the trick was trimming it down even more, so this way the design fit perfectly over the section that we had layered the Mod Podge on. Now, a little tip if you go to redo a piece like this, whether you're using a napkin, whether you're using your paper, whatever, because it doesn't have to be this exact decoupage paper, you're going to want to take just the tiniest bit of your medium and line around the edges that you have already mapped out. This is going to guarantee that if there is any bit of hangover, it's going to stick when you have that ironed on there. Make sure you use a piece of parchment paper if you go to do this. That is going to help protect your paper and your iron. It allows heat to pass through it, so this way your napkin or your tissue paper or your regular paper will melt right on into that Mod Podge. Just pick a side and gently work your way to the opposite side, making sure to flatten out as you go. In a bowl off camera, I mixed a little bit of baking soda, calcium carbonate, and some glue to create a texture paste. And I added a little bit of acrylic paint that matched our beautiful decoupage paper that we have here. I grabbed a stencil and then just put a little design around the edges in a few spots. And people, how gorgeous did this turn out? It is absolutely stunning. Love some good pine cone decor this time of year. So when I seen this pack for $2.99 at Goodwill, I absolutely grabbed it. I'm going to share 3 different ideas with you right here, how you can use these in your decor. For this first one, we're going to just take 2 of the pine cones and then put them to the side and grab us a little terracotta pot. You can leave yours that color. I'm going to grab some of my Waverly chalk paint in the moss color and give it a nice coat. And then I'm just going to look around in my stash, and I had this little gem I picked up about a week or so ago from Goodwill. Okay, Goodwill. Still not breaking the bank over here. And we're just going to put the pine cone in here. We're going to take a couple pieces of greenery and just kind of arrange it in there and just set it. We're not gluing anything down. We're going to take a little piece of floral foam, some of that stinky. Why does this moss have a stench? I sucked it up, okay, and then I grabbed the pine cone and put it on top of our little moss smelly ball and create a little cohesive collection. You can really get creative with this and put little pine cones and a bunch of different things and just set them around your home. Creates a really festive little holiday feel. For this next one, I grabbed some of my little hoogie bobbas and whatchamacallits that I pick up from the thrift stores and just started kind of shoving them up the up the bottom of our tree there, making little trunks. I wanted to add a little frocking onto our pine cones and grabbed my Folk Art multi-surface and a sponge and just tappity tap tap tapped that paint all on the outside of these pine cones. Now I didn't glue anything in place because, believe it or not, they sat there kind of perfectly right on the top, nice and still and sturdy, but feel free to glue yours if you would like. For our last one, we're going to create a door hanger with one of Dollar Tree's bamboo rings. I wanted to add a little something extra on this door hanger than just some pine cones, so I grabbed one of my containers with some hoojabobbits and whatchamacallits I collect from thrift stores. I never remember where I picked these bits up from, but usually I grab them for like 25-50 cents and I always find something to do with them. Today, we're going to be painting them white along with the bamboo circle piece from Dollar Tree, just to add a little pop of color in here, but I'm gonna keep the pine cones all natural. When everything was all dry, I grabbed my twine and cut 5 pieces. Now there's a couple ways you can attach twine and attach your little door hangers, but I like to create a loose knot at the end and then loop the excess twine through it. And then at the end, I will cut that extra twine that's hanging off and I'll glue everything nice and tight together. Once we have it just like this, we can then cut down the twine to different sizes. So this way, everything cascades whatever way you would like. One way or another, one piece longer than the other, or all the same length, completely up to you. I took a bunch of glue, loaded up in the bottom of this pine cone, and then popped in some greenery. I pulled that twine so this way it was perfect the way that it would hang and it wouldn't bunch up and have the pine cone any which way. You can also staple these in. I wanted to be able to reuse the pine cones at some point, and I knew that the glue would just come out of here and I'd be able to do that later on. This beautiful piece at Goodwill had to come home with me. For only $2.99, I knew we could reuse this as much as we would like, making what I like to call little scenes. Now, recently in some stores, I've seen little scenes in teacups, and I thought this would be a great way to do that, but on a larger scale. So I grabbed some cotton swabs for our snow, and I cut down a piece of cardboard and trimmed it to size to fit right inside of this piece. Now I want to keep this, so I want to be able to reuse it and create a new scene. You may see me do this again with this exact piece for a different season. So I'm just going to take some floral foam and set that piece of cardboard on there nice and snug. I'm not going to glue anything down. If I cut this just perfect, like I did, it will fit in here nice and tight. For the main scene for my piece, I'm going to be using this little sleigh I had in my stash. And I wanted to add a little something onto it. So I grabbed some of my TDS dry rub on transfers and just cut a couple sections out to put on the little sleigh, keeping everything pretty rustic and pretty simple. So just wanted to add a little something on to this part. Did not have any little boxes or little gifts, shocker, right, in my stash. So I had to create my own little gifts. And I did that by just taking some Dollar Tree square beads, gluing them all together. Then I painted them and wrapped them with twine and added a little bow onto the top. If you had some thin ribbon, that would look really nice as well. Again, I was going for rustic, so the twine worked out just perfectly. And I knew that the little bows I was going to put in the top had some color onto them. I glued some burlap down on the inside of the sleigh. This way it helped kind of create a little bit of a disconnect between the two boxes and just fill it up, make it look a little nice. And then I glued in our little presents. When I was all done with that, it was time to construct our scenery piece. I started off by just shredding some of that cotton, just pulling as much apart as I could so it didn't look like a bunch of little balls. Now you could absolutely leave them like that if you want it, but I did not want to. And I'm just using some hot glue and I'm making sure not to get any on our piece so I can just remove this and then replace it with whatever I would like at a different time, or just put florals in it in general. That would look really pretty as well. I used some greenery and I took some floral foam to add a little bit of height in the background here and to keep the greenery all in place. And then I added some fairy lights and love how this turned out. What do you guys think? Next time you're in Goodwill and you find something eccentric like this, just pick it on up. Listen, just roll on with me. I'm gonna make it make sense. Plus it was only $2.99. The piece was a little crusty musty, so I did give it a bath off camera. We're gonna need a base, so I'm gonna grab one of these Dollar Tree wood hanging door rounds. And I'm gonna apply a layer of this white Waverly chalk paint to both. I'm starting out with a pouncer just because I like the tappity tap 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 the first base on something like this, and I also feel like pouncers are pretty amazing around thin edges. You can just kind of roll the paint around, whereas paintbrush, it's, you know, you gotta kind of be a little bit perfect around those edges. I did take a smaller trim brush and go back around everything and put a nice coat over our angel. And then after everything was dried, I grabbed a piece of my TDS Creative Decoupage tissue paper. This is one of my favorite designs. It's called Pretty Paloma, and I thought it would make a beautiful background. I'm just kind of putting it over the section I want and then pressing around the edge to get a nice design. This way I can save the excess tissue paper instead of just kind of tearing everything apart. I do feel like if I flip the paper over on the back, I can see where I traced it a little bit better, so it makes it easier for me to cut out and a little bit quicker. For our medium, we're just gonna use some good old Mod Podge. Use whatever medium you would like, and for that matter, use whatever decoupage tissue paper you would like, or whatever background you would like. Use a napkin, whatever. Take the idea and remix it to what works best for your home decor and the eccentric piece you're trying to update. It's been my experience with a larger piece to do that in sections. I do it a lot with napkins and in super small sections, but with the tissue paper, you can get a lot more range than you can with a napkin and have it stick on there better. Now, everybody has their own ways of doing this, but this is what works best for me. So I applied Mod Podge on the top half. I used my water bottle to give it a little spritzy spritz on the back. This helps the paper to just stick better, smooth out, and then absorbs up in the Mod Podge, creating a really nice bond to your piece. And then once I had everything into place, I did use a little bit of cling wrap to smooth it out. I wasn't going for perfect with the tissue paper. If you are, I would recommend using the iron-on method. For me, this worked out just fine, and then I set it off to dry. When it was all dry, it was time to bring on in the little finger sander, or whatever sander you want, or whatever method you would like to get your excess off. I like to just go around the edge most of the time in an up and down motion, well, a downward motion, and remove the excess of our tissue paper or napkin. I'm going to be using some Titebond Quick and Thick to attach our piece, but before we do, I'm going to take some of this black ink Waverly chalk paint and dirty our little angel up. I really did not like how bright white this angel was up against the decoupage tissue paper, so I just used a little bit of that on my finger and did a nice light dusting all around the piece. You could absolutely use gilding wax for this. I was out of my black color, and I'm always sharing that if you don't have gilding wax and things like that, you can use paint just to dust around those edges to really make those highlights pop. And you can see here that it did just that. Now I'm also going to add in a little piece of floral foam right down in the corner and grab some florals and tuck one in there. This is just adding a little bit of extra something to our large wall decor piece that we are creating here. And then I am making a little finger bow with some lace that I picked up from the thrift store some time ago. I just tore a little piece off and then plopped it right on down. I found this large wall decor piece at Goodwill for $2.99. Now I don't want you to get too set on the fact that it's a wall decor piece because we're going to use it for something entirely different and you're going to save money with this idea. So first we're going to turn it over on its back and we're going to remove those hangers because we're not going to be putting this back on the wall. And pay no attention to the fact that those stickers say $7.99. I see that $2.99 sticker I paid $2.99 for, in case you think I'm bluffing you. Like, Brandy, it said $7.99. No, that wasn't the Goodwill sticker. So check this out. You know how a lot of times people like to create the tabletop decor pieces where you can put the floral pieces in using a Dollar Tree crates, or they use the palettes. And even with the palettes, like you even need more. You'll need like 5 palettes, plus you'll need the wood sides and the top and the bottom. And with these, you would still need 5 of these. And any way you're cutting it, you're spending over $5 or $6, which is still pretty budget friendly for the idea in general. But I got this wall decor piece for $2.99 and we're just going to clean this sucker off. Now it wasn't really dirty. You'll be able to see here there was minimal dirt on this. You can feel free to scrub it down as much as you would need to. I am going to just add some candlesticks in here and then put some moss and some greenery in this piece, and you will not know that it was a wall decor. You could reuse it at some point for wall decor if you would like. You could switch this out as many times as you would like and put it in different sections. It is such a budget-friendly way to get this stunning look on your table without having to buy all those Dollar Tree bits. Next time you're in Goodwill, head on over to the houseware section. There's usually some goodies you can find to upcycle in there and transform into your home, like these beautiful candle sconces. However, these suckers had some, I don't know, something weird dangly bit hanging from it. It was not, I was like, and it was not trying to come off. I mean, it was blue tag day and it didn't stop me. I still brought these joints home. Realistically, most things I pick up from the thrift stores, I have to clean. And I really had to scrub. I mean, was it spider webs? What? I don't know still what it actually was. Okay. But I was also terrified that something was going to come creepy crawling right on out of here. So as you can see, I was being real careful removing whatever this also was. While they were off drying, we needed to bust out some napkins, okay? Because we're going to get a little artsy-fartsy on the candle pieces. These are from Dollar Tree, and they're $1.25 or $1.50. I don't know what they cost right now for the 2-pack. But I'm certain you can find them joints at Dollar Tree. Okay, now we're going to decoupage this napkin onto our candles. And whenever you're decoupaging a napkin, there's multiple ways you can do that on a candle. But right now, for this particular project, we're going to just do a patch piece, one on each. Once I remove the sneaky layers in the back and we just have our top decorative layer, I'm taking a little bit of water on a paintbrush to get a very detailed cut around the patch piece. Whenever I'm doing little sections of a napkin onto anything, I call it patchwork. You can feel free to call it whatever you would like, but I'm able to take that teeny tiny paintbrush and go around with a little bit of water and my nails and completely dissect it so we have a beautiful single design like this. And I created 2 of them. This can be tedious though, people, so don't let it fool you. Since it's a cylinder, you see here I'm taking the paintbrush and I'm still trimming down the excess. You don't want that napkin wrapping around and overlaying. It's okay if it does just slightly, but you don't want it to completely wrap and cover one section of the design from another. 1, the design will look botchy and not high end, and 2, you'll have a glob of wax where they're overlaying. So this also helps keep it thin. This next part is going to need you to grab some parchment paper and cut it down to size. Now I get often asked parchment paper over wax paper. That's because wax paper has a waxy film, parchment does not, okay? One is heat resistant, which is the parchment paper, and one is to prevent sticking, which is the wax paper. So you want the parchment paper, but you do you, people. Who am I to tell you which paper to use? Now we're going to take our little sliver and wrap it around our candle and then bring on in the heat gun. Or did the heat gun have an intro, people? Because if not, it does today. Before I have a bunch of people in my comments asking if you can use an iron, you absolutely can, but a heat gun is my preference, and I'll explain why. I like to keep mine on a low setting and then just use my fingers to gingerly press down. Once you're looking at the napkin, you'll notice the piece is starting to become translucent, and you can see where it's not stuck together because it's still fairly white. It's a very big difference once your napkin is completely blended into there. And then you just repeat this process gingerly, keeping it on low. Be sure to keep your fingers away from the heat because it's hot. When you use an iron and you do this, I have experienced that the candles will actually melt with the iron and they'll be kind of deformed and you'll have bunches of wax in different sections, and I don't like that. So this is just my preferred method. To finish these beauties off, I grabbed some of my floral foam, and this is just from Dollar Tree, and I didn't glue them in because I wanted whoever purchased these to be able to use what was in here if they wanted and remove it and redecorate it as they wished. Same thing with the candles. This way it could match whatever decor they have going in at their home with some nice, clean, stunning wall sconces. These beautiful pieces have already been sold on a live whatnot with me and are at their new home. I absolutely love how stunning these turned out. At first, when I seen this little sled at Goodwill, I wasn't really sure what it was, and then I flipped it over and I'm like, oh, it is a photo frame. And it was $3.99. I definitely paid more for it than I would have liked to, but it's not often you see a little sled piece like this, and it's so rustic and I love it, so I had to get it. Plus I had a really cool idea of how to keep this intact just like it is and add a couple little accents on here just to toss into your decor. I did not clean this piece off. I left it just as rusty and crusty as it was. I absolutely loved everything about the piece except for the glass. That had to go. It was too messed up. We weren't using any of that. Now for our center piece, I wanted to just create us an ornament type of ensemble that went in here. So I grabbed some greenery, a little star ornament, and a decoupaged ornament that I made a couple weeks back. With a piece of twine, I put them all together and then hung them right in the center of this sleigh. Now you can absolutely put this wherever you would like in your home. You find a piece like this in Goodwill. I decided to pop it onto a light switch, and I thought it was a perfect little accent to the room. Next time you're at Goodwill and you see one of these old decorative wall decor pieces, don't skip out on them, especially if they're under $5. The shapes on these are amazing and you can easily transform them to match your home decor. To start off, we're gonna knock that sheen off the top by taking this 180 grit sandpaper and going outside. Unfortunately, I wasn't being left alone. Really? I'm busy. That's my mother's dog, Morgan. He means well. Anyhow, we're gonna take some of this paint and do a nice coat all over the whole piece. This is just gonna give us a nice base, and I really like using this paint as a base. It's inexpensive, so I don't feel like I'm wasting it, and it gives really good coverage, usually after just one coat. Feel free to use whatever paint you would like as your base. I know this works really well for me. Once this was dry, it was time for us to add in some details on the edge with some color. I grabbed my DIY paint in the plaster color. I do get my DIY paint from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs for anyone interested. I usually keep that link down in the description box. And people, I tell you what, for real, what is, oh my gosh. Finally. If them lids get stuck on there, people, they are no joke to get off. Ooh, and I have hand grip strength issues, so there's that. I'm using a little angle brush to take this paint and go around all the curvy little detail edges of our wood plaque piece here. I allowed this to dry and I did apply 2 coats. So keep that in mind. 1 coat coverage was not good enough for me with this. Once that was dry, it was time for us to bring in our TDS Creative Decoupage tissue paper. You can remix this idea and do whatever you would like. I am actually going to use the design on the tissue paper as our focal point for our upcycled piece. I'm just using my finger to trace all around the edges and then flipping the tissue paper over on the back to cut it all out. It's easier for me to be able to see where that indent is. Use whatever medium you would like. I'm taking my folk art right here and applying a nice little layer and then trimming gingerly with my fan brush all around the edges, making sure not to go over the sections where I applied the paint. So this way our tissue paper is attached right just onto the white center section. And this is just how I apply this. If you want to go all over the whole piece, that is completely up to you. I'm taking my little water bottle here and giving a little spritzy spritz on the back of this tissue paper. It just helps to spread our piece out, make it a little bit more manipulatable. And I'm just using my hand. Feel free to use a brayer. You could use cling wrap, whatever you want to be able to apply your decoupage tissue paper. When I was happy with the initial application, I then took my cling wrap and just went over where I had already applied with my hands, applied more medium underneath on top of our piece, and then carried on with the same technique to finish the full application. I allowed this to dry and felt like our piece needed a little something still. So I grabbed one of these wood appliques that I also have available on my website and put a layer of our plaster DIY paint on here. If you're a beginner at decoupage, I highly recommend whenever you go to trim off the edges on something, you take your sandpaper and you go straight down. And I explain this very often in my tutorials. Now, if you have a piece like this, it gets tricky because the edge is inside of the trim. There's only one way to really go about this, and that is to go back and forth with your sandpaper, and it is a very ginger technique. And I say that because if you're going back and forth and your ends are not completely sealed with your medium, you're going to have rips and tears. If you make sure your ends are really sealed on there and you go gingerly like I am here, you're going to get a very faded, trimmed look around the edge, and you will notice that your decoupage tissue paper is sanded into that medium, and it really makes it hard to tell where that decoupage tissue paper ends and where the piece begins. It is patience. It took me about 30 minutes to gingerly trim all this, but I also made sure that my medium was on there really, really well all around the edges. So this way there was no breakage around the ends. So the piece blended perfectly. Absolutely love how this turned out. What do you guys think? How stunning is this beautiful ornate teapot I found at Goodwill? And it was only $2.99. I know we could do a little upcycling to it, but first, people, it needed a bath. And on top of it needing a bath, while I was looking over the piece, I noticed that there was a bunch of little chips all around the edge, which I'm like, you know what? It gives it character. It's fine. It's fine. So after I cleaned it up, then we could really, really see the large chips coming out. Okay. And I seen them around the rim and around the little spout piece. So I thought it was just going to be best if we busted out the paint and put a layer of paint on top of our piece. No paint. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to paint it. How many of y'all in the comments were having a fit? I know so many of y'all were having a fit. I was like, I'm going to get y'all. Anyhow, I'm going to leave it exactly how it is because I love pieces that have some character. You could use a piece of styrofoam for this if you want, or floral foam put in here for your florals. I'm just going to take some of Dollar Tree's little greenery pieces and I'm stuffing in some old rice paper. Now I'm going to add a little dowel accent off the top. This is just a piece I had in my stash. You could use whatever little dowel you would like, obviously. And then I'm going to grab me a book and tear out a book page so we could put a little transfer on here and add a little decorative piece out of our teapot. Take this idea and remix it however you would like. I always have books in my stash, whether they're from Dollar Tree or they're used. We're going to apply this onto a piece of cardstock. So this way we can put our transfer on there so it's a little sturdy, and you can use whatever transfers or use decoupage paper, a napkin, whatever. I'm going to be using one of my TDS Creative transfer pieces. This is called Harmony. I'm just cutting out the bird on top of our book page, and then we're going to apply it onto the cardstock so it's sturdy and attach it to our dowel. And you could use a glue stick for this if you want. I like to just spread a little layer of Mod Podge on top of here and then apply our paper or your book page, whatever you want onto here. Once I had this down, I then rubbed our little transfer right onto it and use some painter's tape. You could use regular tape. You could glue this to your dowel, whatever you want to do. I just felt like giving you guys the idea and the inspiration here. And I added some antique wax all around the edges for a little bit of an rustic accent to go with our ornate design on our teapot. And think this turned out so precious. When you're out thrifting and you happen to see little wood bowls or plates, don't skip out on these, people. I'm going to show you a really easy way for you to upcycle these into a riser. I mean, especially don't skip out on these when they're only like $2.99. And yes, there is a marking on the back, and I know all you wood lovers are going to have a problem with what I'm about to do to it, but it'll be fine. You'll be fine. Now, first of all, you can do pegs or legs on your risers however you want. I'm going to give you a nifty little idea that if you happen to have some little wooden spools, you can use these for some legs. The main problem you really run into is finding 4 that are the same size, which took me some time, and I saved you watching me sift through that big old jar. The next problem you run into is removing the old tags. Now, if these were newer, that heat gun would have probably worked, but they were not. They were crusty, and I had to pick each little piece off of here, which was painstaking. But when I had them picked off enough, I brought on in the little finger sander and then sanded them completely down to make sure that any part of the tag that was on there was completely off of our little wood spools. A little tip whenever you go to glue 2 pieces of wood together, it's always a better connection if there is some raw wood without any sealers, without any stains. So as you can see, the bottom of this wood plate piece is very sealed, very stained. So I just took the little finger sander, and in the spots that I wanted to place the wood spools, I sanded them down to where there was some bare wood. So as we glued together our pieces, there was a better connection. Yeah, the camera. This is what happens when I'm trying to sand it down. For our attachment, we're going to be using some of my favorite Type-On Quick and Thick, and people, check this out. I just took the lid off because nothing was coming out, and look at that. It's like a perfectly glued little bits stuck together. That is so oddly satisfying to me. If you guys enjoy that weird stuff too, put it down in the comments. This is why we're friends. I used some of that to put on the bottom of our little wood spools, and then I just popped them into place. I let them dry overnight and then grabbed some of my Waverly chalk paint. And then right before I went to paint, I realized I completely forgot to clean the other side. So when I flipped it over, I'm like, oh, I only wiped the back down when I did that. This had glitter all over it. It's actually pretty clean other than that, but there was glittery bits everywhere, and we want to make sure none of that gets in our paint. I let this dry for a couple minutes and then applied 2 coats of Waverly paint onto this and allowed it to dry for about 3 to 4 hours. If you want to keep yours neutral, a little tip: just find a stain that matches those little wood spools or whatever pegs you're putting on there, and you'll be good to go. I wanted to add a little something to our piece, so I grabbed one of my TDS Creative dry rub on transfers, and instead of using the whole floral bit, I just cut out the floral piece. And if you go to apply a transfer onto paint, it's always good to know that you want to make sure that paint is completely dry, because you could experience your transfer not sticking very well, regardless of how well you're rubbing it, if your paint is still not dry or cured. And another tip I like to share is you can always seal over the paint and then apply the transfer. Usually it turns out really well also. If you see a bucket for under $1, you pick it up. You're welcome for all of you that will now be rhyming that at the thrift store. It was Blue Tag Day, people. So I picked this up because, you know, it was $1.99, so it was under $1. We picked it up. And in reality, who doesn't need some extra little galvanized or metal buckets in their craft or home decor stash? I know I do. We're going to keep this upcycle super easy and just add a little bit of paint over top of the paint that we have here already. I definitely wasn't keeping that mustard color on here. You can take this idea, remix it, and do whatever you would like. There's usually galvanized buckets all over the different thrift stores that I frequent, but for this I didn't want to put a transfer or decoupage it, which I mean I kind of did, but I held myself to a easier standard, okay? And grab some twine. Just grabbed some twine, and I'm gonna wrap it around the center. I'm not gluing anything down. You could absolutely glue yours down if you would like to. I just tied it in the back and then did a bunch of wraparounds, so this way we could see the paint popping through on one end of the twine, or each end of the twine, and then I cut it and tucked it right in the back. And that's all I did for this cute little upcycle. If you see little palette pieces like this that are wood, they're easy to transform and add to your home decor. And it was only $3.99, so we turned this into a little key holder that's pretty practical and way more budget friendly than purchasing one. However, we're gonna need to put in some elbow work, and initially I thought we could just scrape and pry these off. Unfortunately, that wasn't working. So we're gonna need to bring on in the heat gun, because it's been my experience after many years of crafting that sometimes the glue will, just heat up and be easy to remove things. And lucky for me, it was. Just heated these little bad boys up and then tossed them right out of the way, because we're not going to be using those. And no, I didn't keep them either, because by the time I was done shaving them off, they were all messed up. Now you're going to need a couple of bits, and these are the ones I'm going to use for this project. You can use whatever ones you would like. First up are these hammer tooth hangers. I love these. They're easy to put in your pieces. And then these little cup holder pieces that I get both off of Amazon. We're going to use them on the bottom of our piece and the hammer piece in the back. And then I'm going to take some of these wood appliques that are on my website and put one at the top and then the other two at the bottom. You can create your piece however you want, even if you want to use the other side that we removed the family from, but I wanted to use the little pocket side. So I took some of my favorite Titebond Quick and Thick and put at the top and at the bottom of the two corners, and then pressed in the 3 wood appliques. I did allow these to completely set for 24 hours before I carried on to the next thing. You could probably get away with waiting just 3 or 4 hours. This stuff usually dries pretty quickly. For the color, since our piece is already brown, I decided to just take some Waverly's Antique Wax. You could absolutely paint this whatever color you want whenever you find your piece that you would like to recreate, but I figured since it's already brown, why not keep the rest of the piece brown? Now I'm taking my little water bottle and doing a little spritz around the piece, because it helps, 1, me to save some of the wax, and 2, to move it around quickly. Been staining wood for many years, and whenever I'm creating stain art, I use a lot of water and baby wipes to move that around, saving me on materials, as well as getting the application on there fairly quickly. I allowed this to dry for about 2 hours and was completely happy with the coverage, and then started attaching our little pieces. You could absolutely take a drill and do pre-drilled holes for these little cup holders if you want, but I get nervous because sometimes if you over drill, like the bit is too big, then the cup pieces won't hold. So it's been my experience just to take one of the little Cricut tools, poke in, and then kind of press it and wiggle it a bit, and it allows you just enough space to be able to spin these in. And I have hand grip strength issues, so when I get to that point where it starts tightening, instead of just, struggling, I grab my needle nose pliers and then wiggle it the rest of the way in till it's nice and snug. There are a ton of ways you can hang pieces, but this is absolutely my favorite. They're so easy to apply into anything. You just place them where you wanna, and then tappy tap with your hammer, and it's completely in there and ready to go. You could absolutely add Gorilla Glue gel to either the cup hooks or to the back of the little hanger for some added extra security if you would like, but you usually don't have to. If you're looking for more upcycling inspiration, check out this video right here. And as always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time.